afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from on this big, beautiful planet of ours. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where we try to dig a little bit deeper than what you'll see on the mainstream corporate media. Hey, and that's going to be our topic today, okay? Our topic's going to be how to deal with this oligopoly that exists within the United States when it comes to media. And when I say media, I mean I'm mostly meaning the news media, the so-called network news media. But also, if you actually take a look at the oligopoly that exists in the United States, you'll see that it extends far beyond just what you see on your so-called news programs. If you just look up PBS, and there's a documentary they did a long time ago called The Merchants of Cool. So you type into Google Merchants of Cool PBS Media Giants, and you'll see what it was like even over a decade ago, and it's only gotten more consolidated since then. But there are ways to tackle this. Now, first, before I begin, I would encourage people to, if you're listening to this later, when I put it on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube station. Keep update on new shows. Also, if you have Twitter, consider adding me. My handle is PsychoMike777. Okay, now let's just go ahead and begin. Now, I titled this, basically, if you're tired of the biased media, then do this. And I did a show recently about what you can do to actually magnify your influence in politics, society, whatever area you want to have a say in, how you can magnify that. Okay? And do so without running for office necessarily, although I would strongly encourage it if you can. But how you can basically get your message out. Get past that fourth estate, as they used to call it, where the big media, the big newspapers, the big networks could filter out what you had to say. How they could filter out basically what stories got covered, what issues got covered, and so forth. And really, ultimately, the issues that get covered traditionally were the ones that were chosen by the large oligopoly. Okay? Basically, the influence of the huge, usually, conglomerates based in D.C., New York, to a certain degree Los Angeles, could choose what issues they would cover, and of course that would influence what issues were covered at the more local level. And anything outside of that, didn't get covered. It was considered not important, because most Americans believe that if an issue is out in the headlines, it's important. But if it's not being covered, it's not. Now that's changing because of the internet. And people need to actually jump in there and start using the internet. This is a fantastic tool. And for all we know, maybe there will be restrictions in the future. Who knows? I mean, you may have a situation where you have some sort of fairness doctrine imposed. But at this moment in time, you can really use the internet to become part of the news media. Okay? Now, one thing I have noticed during the primaries in 2016, who knows, you might be listening to this in 2017 or beyond. The thing that I noticed is that a lot of people would show up to these Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump rallies, okay? And they would use their iPhones or cell phones, or with, some use camcorders if they want to have certain features that they don't have on their phones. And they would film what was going on. Not just the speech, that was being given, but also what might be taking place within the audience, or maybe counter protesters or whatever. Now, the important thing is, and this is also the sad thing, is that most of these people were just doing this so they could have it in their own personal file. Now, think about this, though. Think that if you went to any political rally whatsoever or political presentation, and it doesn't even have to be political, it could be religious, it could be social, it could be whatever. And if you film that and then share it with people, think of the impact that could have. Now, one of the things that was very important in the election in 2008 was that was the first what you could call YouTube election. Okay? John McCain, and this is true to a lot of conservatives out there. It's changing a little bit, but especially in 2008. John McCain really did not take full advantage of the changes in technology. He ran in my opinion, he ran a very traditional campaign. And if you think about this, whatever you learned 15 years ago about campaigning, getting mailing lists, sending out things to people for contributions, things like that. It's important, but it's not the important thing it used to be. Okay? Now, most people now get at least a large portion of their information from outside of the traditional media. Now, the traditional media, they could show up to a protest rally. That has 10 people at it. And if they want to make sure that protest gets most of the coverage, they can do it. And they can interview all 10 of those people. And whichever one, if they're in favor of the protest, and if whichever person in that protest is the most articulate and makes the best reasoned commentary, that is what you're going to see on your news program. Okay? Now, if this is a counter protest and there's 10,000 people out there with a viewpoint, but there's 10 counter protesters, they can basically kind of steal that platform away from the 10,000 and use it for their own agenda. I've seen it done. Okay? I took part in a counter protest one time. Well, there was maybe 4,000 people that had organized this thing for weeks and weeks. And I and some other people had a counter protest to it, and we got more publicity. In fact, on one news channel, they only covered us. So this is something that the media often can do. But with your recording device, you can make sure that doesn't happen, or at least it doesn't happen to the same degree. And also, you got to remember, that story in the media goes out, and most 95% or more of the people that will ever see that will see it on that one evening when it plays. On the other hand, if you put something on YouTube, then that could be seen indefinitely as long as YouTube's up. Now, what I'm going to say is become part of the independent media. Some people call it the alternative media, but become part of it. And don't worry that you may not have the ability, for instance, to grow into something big and huge and massive. Okay? A million hits on a website or a million views on a video. That is not what is important, because in 2008, Obama's people, what they realized is if a whole bunch of people in the audience film an event and then they put it on YouTube, it grows amongst all those people, and it lives, it circulates, it continues to get views. And this is what people have to understand who are more traditional or conservative, for instance. That is something that is a medium that can be used. And it must be used. Now, I'm going to show you. I'm going to go through several steps here on how to increase your influence. Okay? And one thing before I begin, George Bernard Shaw, and this is a paraphrase, George Bernard Shaw said that 2% of people think, about 2 or 3% of people think they think, and the other remaining, 95% would rather die than think of something like an original comment. Now, when I was in university, I had political science classes where they noted that only a very, 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 very tiny percentage of people actually have a huge influence, because they go out and they put signs up or even put a bumper sticker on their car, or take part in writing a letter to the editor. Okay? And the thing is that truth means that those people who do participate have a greater amount of influence. On the other hand, when someone from the elite says, oh my gosh, do we really want those people out there participating? They will not really want to encourage that, because they're comfortable going into some newspaper executive's office and saying, we need some stories maybe dealing with this, or even shaking hands going, hey, I haven't seen you since college, what's going on with you and the family and so forth. And, these issues are what's important to us right now. Maybe we can, and go on and on. Okay? You have a focal point. You have a place you could go to these large media giants and be able to discuss if you're part of the elite. You don't have that advantage if you're not part of the elite. Okay? So you need to use what's available and magnify your influence beyond the one vote that you will have during an election day. Now, first of all, the YouTube. What I would suggest you do is this. Now, there's several avenues you can take, but the first thing you have to start with is getting a YouTube channel. Okay? Go through it. Find out how to do a YouTube channel. It's pretty self-explanatory if you just go to YouTube and set up a channel. You don't even have to use a real picture of yourself or something. You can use a symbol or whatever. And you can name your channel anything you want. And then go ahead and start the process of getting people to see what you have to say. Now, the one thing you can do, as I've already said, is you can film events that you go to. You can interview people. Heck, the camera capabilities you have now, that most of us have now, whether they be in a phone or if you've got a camcorder or something like that, the filming capabilities are fantastic if you compare those to, those big, giant, bulky cameras you used to see maybe, 20 years ago when people would go and do an event for a news program. So, what that cameraman has on his shoulder 20 years ago, you've got now in your pocket. And you can film stuff. You don't even have to really be good at editing or anything. I'm horrible at editing. But the thing is, you can go out there and you can film something. You can interview people. Or, the next avenue you could use is just sit back and just talk. I've seen videos with hundreds of thousands of views where someone's just sitting in their car and giving their opinion. Oh, don't be driving while you're giving your opinion. That's probably not a good idea. But they could be sitting in their car and just giving their opinion about any range of issues. That's something you can do. You can actually just share. And, there was some studies done back in the 1970s. I forget the name of the study, but this goes along with some of those studies on social conformity, the Ash studies, the Milgram studies, Zimbardo studies, and all these kinds of things that were going on in the 1970s, especially where you were trying to see how people conform to social norms and rules and that sort of thing. But they did a study. Again, I don't remember the name of it or the professors that did it, where they checked to see how much people would accept if a professor would give a discussion in class but allow no discussion from the audience. And then, without going into details of how the study was constructed, then they have another situation in which someone would actually, before going in, they knew that they would be doing this, what you call dissident effect, where they would actually, the professor knew what was going to go on too, where this person would then challenge the professor's views on an issue, a controversial issue. And then you could study the difference between people accepting what the professor had said in case A and case B. And what you found was in case B, when someone had raised their hand and challenged the professor, there was far, far, far less acceptance of what the professor had said. Because what happened was, in the first case, people have this kind of thing like, oh, well, can I be right? It looks like there's 100 people in this classroom that accept what the professor's saying without challenging him. So maybe, even though I disagree with what he's saying, maybe I'm the one who's not informed very well. Whereas in the other case, people who might actually be disagreeing with the professor in their own mind, suddenly someone champions their viewpoint. And all of a sudden, there's less desire to accept it because now they feel like the views out there, they're not the only one holding that viewpoint. Plus others who might not have thought of something suddenly are going, hey, yeah, that's right. That's right. Why should I believe what he or she says up in front of the room when there's some other points that disagree with it? There are more than one side to this issue. So you're going out there and sharing your views, okay, on the internet are very vital, okay? And they don't get as selected as they might be if you just send a letter to the editor of a local newspaper. I mean, still there are people that read letters to the editor in local newspapers. They still read local newspapers. They're just not as popular as they used to be, okay, especially amongst young people. But still, in the old days, editor looks at something, they're going, I really don't like what this person's saying, so they don't print the letter. Other editors would be nice and try to show balance. However, the internet, on your YouTube station, you can say what you want within the confines of law, at least. But the thing is, you can express your opinion and you can give the reasons why you support this. So, first, you can, if you go, I don't know, let's just say that I'm filming this during the week of the Republican convention. You could go to a Trump rally and film it and just stick that on there. Or you can interview people and say, hey, why are you out here supporting Trump? And then they say why. Hey, you put that out there. Let them know kind of, you should let them know that you have a YouTube station and you're just interviewing people for their commentary on something. Okay, I'm not a big fan of the whole interview someone and then they don't know where they're going to wind up. Even though, legally in a public venue, it's probably going to be okay. I would suggest you let them know and get permission. But anyway, that's the first step you take. Get a YouTube station, start putting videos out there, and maybe even do a footnote because you can use annotations. Okay, there's a lot of places you can learn how to do this. Really easy. You make a footnote on your videos that say, please become a subscriber. Now, you see, that was a problem. When I first started a YouTube channel about, it must be about 3 years ago now, I just stuck them on there and, I'd get a subscriber here or there, and I was like, oh, okay, what in the world does this mean? And then someone told me, hey, you get a subscriber, they get an announcement as to when you put another video up. And it means that subsequent videos have a better chance of getting views, which means the more views your video gets, the more likelihood it will be shown on related video sites to the right, and that you'll get more views from it. If you're only getting like 5 or 6 views on a video, a year later it might be up to 7 or 8. But if you wind up with, let's say, 100 views on your video in the first month, it's probably going to be growing 1 or 2 or 3 per day. And then as it grows, it gets more views. I have lots of videos now that get an average of 20, 30 views a day. I've had some that have wound up getting like between 100 and 200 views per day. Okay, so it depends on the topic, of course, but these things can go viral because then people read them and they watch them and they're thinking, whoa, I like this, and they send it out. Now, another thing you can do with YouTube, which is very similar to what we do here, is you can get a podcast. There's a lot of sites that you can go and do free podcasts. Now, there's thousands and thousands of people that do podcasts, okay? So you're competing, and probably not that many people are going to follow you and listen to your podcast on the free sites. So what you probably should do, if you're not to that point where you can actually get on an actual political site that is hosted, and you're just doing it freelance, what you should do then is turn those podcasts into audio video for your YouTube. And that way it starts growing. You can make a comment. You can leave a link to your podcast. People will listen to it if you're doing it weekly. On the other hand, they can actually just listen to it on YouTube. But it still gives you an opportunity to reach out. They hear, oh, this is from a podcast. So therefore, people have this credibility thing. I remember Edward Bernays was being interviewed on TV once, and the interviewer said, oh, hello, Dr. Bernays. And then Bernays, when he replies, he says, oh, I'm glad you said doctor, because now people will listen to me more. Well, that's actually true, too, to a certain degree. If you have a podcast, people are going, oh, this person's got a podcast. So therefore, and they psychologically give you a little bit more credibility. Although you don't need to have it, it can help a little. All right. But the podcast, you can just go ahead, download as an audio file, go to Windows Movie Maker or any of the other sites that you can make movie with, and then upload it to YouTube. And then you're actually speaking to people, but it can be, you don't even have to be you. You could be you, but you could take a picture and you could put on there, and that's what they look at. Okay, my personal opinion is you should always try to find pictures that you've done that are related to the topic, or they don't even have to be related to the topic. They just be a nature picture that you took. Because I have a sneaky suspicion that in the future they could pass copyright laws where there may be something that's out there that's fair use now, but maybe in the future they cease to have that as an option. They may say, oh, this is copyrighted. And then they could say, well, I want this video taken down because you're using a copyrighted picture. Okay, so I use my own pictures. And I've seen some very, very famous people in the alternative media who that's what they do. They will take a picture, let's say, of a beautiful mountain. And then they'll talk about a totally unrelated issue to nature. But the thing is that that's just the background. And most of the time people, when they're listening to shows and stuff, they generally are doing something else at the same time. Whether they're doing something on another internet site, or maybe they're doing the dishes. They just turn it on and listen. So pictures are not necessarily that important. They may help, but ultimately what's important is the message. So YouTube as a way of growing your influence. Remember, if every single person at one of these rallies, the last rally you ever went to, had filmed it and stuck it on YouTube, think about how many people would have been reached. Think about it. Now, you're probably thinking, well, how do I get beyond that, 4 or 5 people that just happen to come across my video? Well, there's several techniques, and I'm going to get into blogs here in just a moment. But to promote your YouTube video, what you can do is you can go to, you'll see sites all over the internet where you can stick a video. There's also the idea that there's news sites where there may be an article about an issue, and that issue could be what you've dealt with on your video. Now, don't spam. Spam is usually defined as you're just sticking something there for people to come to your site. Generally speaking, if you just stick a video there, it's going, you could get some sort of warning about spamming. But if on the other hand, your video deals with that topic and you write a paragraph or two there discussing the topic that's been discussed in the article and then put your video as a link, that normally is not seen in the same context as a spam because you've actually said something. Then you put it, at least I've never had any complaints. There may be some sites that would say, yeah, still trying just to drive traffic up to your video. Okay, that could happen. It's never happened to me. Okay, but don't do something in which you're just going around just sticking your videos and stuff all over the place and just, that's it. Just your link to your video, because you will get in trouble eventually with hosting sites. But make sure that you're still taking part in debate and your video may just be a supplement to it. Okay? And again, I don't know the whole technicalities of every site. You just have to go with it, but usually you should say something. Okay? I've just never had any problems personally, since that's how I do it. Now, the other thing you can look at is creating your own blog. Now, there's lots of free places out there. A lot of times people sit back and they're like, blah, 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 I hate this candidate, or blah, blah, I hate this issue, or I like this, I think the politician should do this. Why don't we do this? And they'll use a lot of energy to say, to talk, or sometimes just to themselves. But the thing is, if you have your own blog, then you can write it out and then share it. Get it out there. Now, at first, this happened to me recently. I shouldn't be telling a negative thing, because I'm trying to encourage people. But this happened to me recently where I guess I was dealing with like government mind control using psychology and surveillance and these kinds of issues. And someone malwared my site and it killed it. The person that designed the site for me couldn't resurrect it. Fortunately, I had saved my articles and I had put them onto a free site. And the thing is that at least in that sense, you should preserve the stuff you do, because it can be taken down. But the important part is that when I first had started this site about almost 2 years ago, they got taken down just recently by some, jerk. What happened was it started out with just getting a few views. Very, very tiny, numbers of views, 5 people a day, perhaps, and I tagged, the topics and everything, and it was still, about 5 views. And then I started linking my website to my YouTube videos, and it started growing. But that growth in people coming to my site meant that I was having more and more and more views each day. And it grew slowly. But by the time it was taken down, I was getting about 100 views a day. All right. And I noticed that some search engines on certain topics, my website was coming up in the top 10 of Google searches for that topic. And so I was getting a lot of views from around the world, and I was getting a lot of traffic because, you can get those things that say where your traffic's coming from. I was getting a lot of original traffic that was coming from internet searches. Okay. But at first, probably you're going to have to be doing a little bit of work where, again, share your video. Video too, but share your website, blog, whatever, on Facebook and other social media. I'm not going to get into a lot of Twitter, stuff like that. It's a good thing to use, but I don't want to get people getting this psychological feeling of being buried. Because I've talked to people saying, oh, you should be on Tumblr, you should be on Pinterest, you should be on Instagram, you should be on, and on, and on. Start out simple at first, and you can share what you do on your Facebook page or create a Facebook group, and then you'll be more likely to get like-minded people. And then as your numbers start growing, someone sees that you've got a link on your YouTube to your blog. They listen to that. They come to your blog. You're growing everything at once. There's a feedback taking place in which things will grow. Now, right now, I had to switch to my free blog that I had saved my articles on, and it started out with, when it was just there as a reserve, just in case something happens, it was getting maybe one view every couple days. And then when I switched and started, I replaced the other one on my links on my YouTube channel with the links to that page, all of a sudden, it starts growing, but it's now only just starting to grow to where, start 5, then 6 a day, then 7 a day, 8, 9, 10, 11. And eventually it will grow back to where it will start showing up in searches, and probably someone will take it down. But nonetheless, every single person that comes to my website and reads it after also seeing a YouTube channel is going to be reinforced in their viewpoints in regards to the topic I'm covering. I'm giving information. I'm sharing information. This is not to make money. Okay, I'm not doing this as some sort of profit thing. What I'm encouraging is that people learn more and be more informed, because you're not going to get informed by watching the mainstream media, okay? And even if you're watching more conservative mainstream media, you're still not going to get a lot of information, okay? There's usually more also than just two sides to an issue. There might be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It could be multidimensional that you need to get more and more information from. So doing your own media, becoming a citizen journalist, alternative media, independent media, it's in your grasp, and you can do it. And there's no reason why you shouldn't. And you should really, 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 really try to use these techniques while they're still there. Use these techniques while they're still there in order to reach more people. And the thing is, we all have something that we don't really know a lot about, okay? There's probably some famous Asian philosopher somewhere that said, the more you know, the less you really do know, or something like that. But the thing is that we need to realize that for people to really comprehend what is out there, what's going on, and we got a lot of stuff going on, man. We've got possibilities of war, and I'm not talking about little wars, where like America goes and bombs some little country, and that's, there's no chance that little country has. I'm talking about big stuff, like Walking Dead is your future type of war. We have possibilities of economic crashes. We have concentration of wealth, resources. We have psychological manipulation of people's attitudes, whether those attitudes be towards politics or even basic family issues. We have all of these things taking place. And if you know something and you really don't want to share it, then you're just going along with the basic establishment that says, hey, this is what we have, the resources, we have the ability to reach 10 million people with this particular news program or something, and you're nothing. But if 10 million people start doing their own independent media out there, to where even if you just pretend like they only get 5 views a piece on whether it's their blog or their YouTube channel or whatever, that's 50 million people. And it also extends to around the world. There's a lot of countries that don't allow as much freedom as is allowed in democratic nations in the West. And when you do your stuff, a lot of these countries don't block your content. All right? And sometimes they may block YouTube, but they don't block smaller blogs. And so I was in a country once where something happened, and I wanted to find out this news event because people had told me, like, "Oh, are you guys okay?" And I'm like, "Huh?" And there wasn't anything in the press from that country. And I couldn't find information until I actually went to some blogs that had repeated news stories. And so you can get through just about everywhere and anything. And we live in a world that, one of the aspects of globalization is our communication system is global. And one of the advantages of knowing English is the fact that so many people out there in other countries know English. So the thing is that they are able to communicate with us and us them. And so the internet is like this big global community in which you can get hits on your website. Like you can get, I get hits all the time. Things like, Gambia and Indonesia and so forth. Most of them do come from my top hits, both on YouTube as well as my webpage, are the United States, Britain, Australia. Okay, that's to be expected because English speaking. But then I get a lot of hits from Scandinavia, and then it's like Germany, and I get not an insignificant number from Russia. And just about every country in the world, I've had someone visit my website. So the thing is that this is a splendid opportunity to, instead of going, I wish people would just, realize the truth about this. Well, give them a chance to. In the old days, back in the Revolutionary War of the United States, people would go out to the town square and they would give a speech. They would encourage people like, hey, this is what's going on. And, people gathered there because they'd come in from the countryside to trade and stuff. This was where people, you could hear a person talk about politics over here, another one talking about religion over there. Okay? We don't have that anymore. If you go into the average mall in the United States today and you go out by the fountain and you start talking about religion or politics or something, you're going to get a security guy that's going to come by and say, could you please leave? That sort of thing. You can't even take petitions in most malls anymore. So ultimately, the internet is where you have the town hall. That's the place you can gather information. It's the place you can share ideas. And maybe your idea is kind of like you're really off on the fringe, I don't know. You're just you're a conservative, libertarian hippie or something, okay? I met him actually. But now you can connect to other conservative, libertarian hippies and not feel like, you go to a meeting with a bunch of libertarians and they're all like in, shirts and ties and that sort of thing. And here you're more comfortable with Birkenstocks and tie-dye T-shirts and cut-off jeans, for instance. Okay, this you can connect, you can create communities, and you can really, really make an impact nowadays. And that's what I would encourage people to do. Anyway, coming up on the end here. So again, look into it. Don't just don't sit back and think, this participatory democracy is not a spectator sport in its ideal form. It's not what people like the founding fathers of the United States envisioned when they talked about community connection and informing the voters. Okay, it's not a spectator sport. Otherwise, sit in front of the TV, listen to what's going on TV, scream at your TV when you don't agree with it. And you know what? You're not really affecting anyone's life except maybe scaring your cat or dog, or, the kids are going to go off in the other room like, there's mom or there's dad, griping about politics again. Focus your energies somewhere to where you can actually make a difference. And you don't even know who it is. Could be you might live in California and there's someone in northern Scotland who becomes your biggest fan or something. And you'll never meet this person, but you're still having an impact on his or her life. You got to question the mainstream media, because you know what? The media is the PR for those who are in power. Okay? It almost sounds like a rap song. The PR for those in power, that sort of thing. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into music. But the thing is that the media serves the interest of the ruling elite. All right? The people that have the money, the people that are at the top when it comes to whatever endeavor. Okay? Usually transnational corporations, since they're the ones that really are the ones who control the actual companies that own the stations and a lot of other things that people don't usually associate with media, like movie studios and television production firms and that sort of thing. But really, maybe at the local media, if you live in a small town, your local station's going to cover like the annual fair and who won the biggest pumpkin contest and those sorts of things. But the major media, you're not going to get those kinds of things unless there's, they want to entertain people, kind of rope them in. But usually these are things that are done in order to, set an agenda. And my gosh, this debate the other night, the second debate, Donald Trump's second debate. I noticed in the first debate, the very first debate, the media was very quick to say, oh my gosh, Hillary just, won that debate hands down. And I later watched it thinking, oh my gosh, Trump must have just been destroyed. And I watched it and I thought, actually, at worst, it was a draw. I didn't see anyone deliver any memorable quotes that would suddenly be what everyone was talking about at the water cooler or at the lunch table or something like that. I could see why they weren't covering it, because I think Trump really, really won that one. He went in there the underdog. I mean, you had Anderson Cooper and that gal, whatever, I forgot her name. And, what was it? The first thing they brought up was a whole thing about the locker room talk and really trying to make it sound like that he wasn't bragging about what he could do, which is actually the true context of what he was talking about, but instead made it sound like bragging about what he'd already done. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. People sit around joking sometimes about what they would do if they were a serial killer or something like that. Yeah, I know a lot of people that joke about, I would just do it this way. You could record that, and then you could take it out of context and say, hey, they are serial killers. They must have done this and this and this because they're talking about it. And you take the parts out about the let's pretend I was. And instead, they're just relating about it. But they went on, and he did a good job in countering it. Okay? He did a good job. He diverted the issue, which in debate, normally you kind of think, well, you're supposed to stay on subject when you're asked a question. But he knew that this was not going to be a fair debate. He knew that. So what he did was he very smartly made sure that he was the one defining the topics. He started just talking about the topic and relating it back ultimately to the original question. But he went off on national security and some of these other issues. Now later, the zinger, the what do you call that golden soundbite that people are always looking for, that people will talk about. Then he did that when Hillary Clinton was saying, well, would we really want you as president? Would we really want someone with your temperament leading the country? And then he shoots back and goes, no, because you'd be in jail. And that was good. That was good because, again, in our country, there is a strong sense that the rich have a set of laws and the poor have a set of laws. And so therefore, that most people, at least according to the opinion polls I've seen, and opinion polls generally are biased, in favor of Hillary, not because they're true results, but even when you saw the opinion polls that were done when it was Hillary versus Bernie Sanders, the opinion polls always showed her way better off than she really was. Okay, so there's times of day you can call, but anyway, the opinion polls show that people think there was unfairness about things, about how things were dealt with when it came to Hillary. That, you get some private, let's say, and he might share some information, accidentally even, that can be seen as jeopardizing the security of his troop or their headquarters. He's going to be in jail, okay? He's going to be in jail. And for Hillary to, just think that she got off because the FBI director said, well, you're careless, but we're not going to go after you. And there's a lot of speculation about why that was the case. Again, laws are for one people, laws are for another. But the thing is that this is something that really encapsulated the debate. It's the one thing everyone remembers. And then later when he said, I would appoint a special prosecutor to look into you, I was talking to a strong Hillary backer. Don't worry, she's not American, so she can't vote. But a very strong Hillary backer. And she thinks that everyone's against Hillary, it's because she's a woman. And I said, well, what about these legal things? Oh, she's never been actually put in jail or anything like that. It's just propaganda. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Seriously, it's just propaganda? I mean, if you really look at the information behind a lot of the things that have been said about Bill, and of course, the media has kind of tried to twist that to mean, oh, Bill just is a ladies' guy. He just can't, keep his pants up, which kind of gives you that sort of crazy rock star or something like that image. But in reality, if Hillary was doing things to make sure that the investigations were in some way biased or hampered or any of those kinds of things, which many people have alleged, then that means it went beyond just, even harassment on his part, if it was harassment, at least alleged harassment and alleged, some people saying rape. But the thing is that if it did happen, or even if it didn't happen, if Hillary responded by going after people and trying to dig up stuff on him, then you would think this would get feminists really upset. I mean, feminists, and rightly so. I really support them on this. They will get really angry if a woman is charged. I mean, if a woman she gets raped, and then the defense attorney goes into her history, finds out maybe she was a nude model or something like that when she was in college to help pay her bills. And they'll bring that up, and of course, the jury, many of the juries sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, what kind of woman is that? And, they let the rapist go. Horrible. If any of that kind of stuff took place, if you were going and seeing what was it was there any kind of intimidation? That's way worse than any of the allegations on Bill. Okay, at least in my opinion, where you try to find things to prevent justice from being done. That's worse than the actual perpetrator themselves. But nevertheless, Trump brought it up. And I think he's going to bring it up more. I think in this third debate, the final one, it's going to be a doozy, okay? But there's another thing that was brought up, and I really did not like the way Hillary played this. She's really trying to make it sound as if any disclosures about her, there's something that Glenn Greenwald just recently published about, how the Democrats are doing this. But if there's any kind of disclosures about the Democrats or Hillary or something like that through WikiLeaks, then immediately there's the allegation that this is all part of a Russian plot. My gosh, what is this 1955? The Russians are hiding under our beds, and they're ready to come out and rape your dog and steal your daughter and take her off to become a good communist somewhere in the Ural Mountains or something. This is crazy. There's no evidence, no evidence whatsoever the Russians had anything to do with leaking any of this information. But yet, the Democrats have made it sound as if, A, you can't trust the leaks, okay? You can't trust them, they may be wrong. Greenwald just totally put that to rest, in my opinion. Or that the Russians did it, so therefore it doesn't count. We need to make sure that the Russians are punished. What scares me when I hear people talk about punishing WikiLeaks or punishing the Russians or something like that is, of course, they're not going to go arrest Vladimir Putin. Even if it was proven, which it isn't, and I really doubt it is the case anyway, that the Russians had anything to do with this. What happens when we start getting a mindset that says that anything said that's negative to what the president wants is automatically suspect? Maybe we need to start investigating those people that on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are sharing WikiLeaks information with their friends. Maybe they're actually Russian agents in disguise. Maybe alternative media is all part of a Russian plot. Maybe, you got Vladimir Putin and he calls up his trusted, spy, what would we call him? Alexei Jones or something like that, who he's embedded into Texas and so forth. And they set up the plan on how they're going to go after patriotic Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. This is scary stuff. And if you really like your First Amendment, I think you better, just remember what Obama said. If you like your health care, you can keep it. And then later when Reid and the rest of them got this health care bill through, you found out you couldn't keep it. So maybe, right now it's like, if you like your First Amendment, you can keep it. Well, I don't know if that's going to be the case. Not when Hillary is appointing Supreme Court justices and federal judges. And when they hear cases, they're going to rule in favor of the political stance that Hillary Clinton has. Okay, she's going to be very careful. She's a good investigator. I think she's a very good investigator. They'll find out if a judge could possibly have any conservative or traditional viewpoints towards the Constitution. And when they find out he does or she does, then they won't nominate them, even if they're good on most of the other issues, in their opinion. And there's plenty of judges out there. They can easily find someone who's going to be right down, liberal all the way. Make Ruth Ginsburg look like, Anthony Scalia. Okay? They'll do that. And this is really scary. And I think this is something that Donald Trump needs to bring up in the next debate. Or, he needs to really tell people that there's two things. No, actually, there's three things. There's three things I would really hope that Trump brings up in the next debate. One is the idea that of how rich Hillary Clinton really is. Okay? And you got to remember, has she ever actually owned a business that made something? How did she, you got to ask yourself, how did she make all this money? She's got a lot. How? You got to remind people that this is not a race between a rich billionaire named Trump and just a regular lady named Hillary. You've got to point out, that, all the things that are luxurious. I've done that. I've shared this information with people and they sound like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Because there really is a sense of unfairness out there, not just with the law. Second, you've got to emphasize war. You've got to emphasize that if you're elected, First thing you're going to do is start trying to have peace between Russia and the United States. The Democrats are already running with the idea that, Putin and Trump are buddies, even some sort of conspiracy or something like that. What you've got to do is you've got to make sure then that you say, let's have peace. Let's give peace a chance. I'll call, he'll call Putin, and they'll work out some deals so there won't be mushroom clouds all over the world. And lastly, you got to deal with the courts. You got to say, what will Hillary do to the First Amendment, to the Second Amendment? Just the First and Second Amendment alone. I mean, we could deal with the other amendments. Most people don't know that much about them. Let's deal with the First and Second Amendment. The right to bear arms, the right to speech. And when I say speech, to be able to go on the internet and be able to say what you please and be able to broadcast and reach other people, even though you're not some big, giant media conglomerate based in New York or Los Angeles. The internet evens things up. Okay, you may not have an audience of, CNN or even an alternative audience like Alex Jones. But if you just have a small audience, that's your right. That's your right. Just like in the old days, back in the Revolutionary War, maybe a guy gets up and just starts, the public square where everyone's coming in to sell their chickens and buy stuff, just gets up and starts ranting. Okay, we don't do that so much anymore. We have the internet for that. And you can do that. And that's just something that could be very, very, in jeopardy if Hillary gets elected. You're going to get the fairness doctrine. You're going to get maybe even a fairness doctrine for the internet, where if, you have someone trying to set up an alternative media thing and they're talking about gun control, that they would have to invite someone who is pro-gun control. Well, most of alternative media is just someone setting something up themselves and not even making any money off it, just doing it. What happens when they get a notice saying, well, we can't do this, or they put their YouTube videos up on YouTube, they get a notice later because some law gets passed saying that, well, we can't accept these videos because they're biased. I mean, this could happen. Okay? I'm not saying YouTube would do it. I'm saying that a law could be passed to force YouTube to do it. This could happen. You already see social media doing things, kind of, underreporting conservatives or even dampening their outreach. So think about if Hillary's in and everyone's working together to kind of squelch these kinds of civil liberties. This is something Trump needs to bring up in the next debate, and I hope he does. Anyway, that's about it for tonight's show. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll be back next week for another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions.
On the Tracks you can catch every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on UC.